We'll now switch over to hear from the IOOS Program Office Director, Carl Gouldman. Carl, welcome again. Carl is a regular attendee at our board meetings and a most welcome regular attendee. He has been serving since February 2017 as the director of the program office, and prior to that, he was the deputy director of the program. Starting in 2014. Has been in and around Noaa since 2020. He's got a bachelor's in political science from Duke, a master's from Duke, and like most Duke alumni at this point, is still in mourning with the retirement of Coach K. Be that as it may, Carl, the floor is yours. Thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Had to put me in mourning to start my talk. So I am sad about Coach K leaving Duke basketball. I am also sad about Josie. That's a tough job. You got to be able to deal with the IOOS director on a regular basis, and Josie's done that pretty darn well. We'll see how the next one does. We're really glad to be on these calls with Josie on a regular basis as well. And it's going to be a different game once you're off in the sunset on your sailboat eating those lobster rolls. Jen has my slides and is going to drive for me, I think, and I've got two screens working with this GoToMeeting, which is working. So hopefully I'll get through here. Yeah, so thank you for that slide 2 there. So I think I've briefed you guys on office priorities recently, not that long ago, and they haven't changed. I updated this slide a little bit for a recent meeting in Gloss. The bottom line up front is, the tried and true activities of IOOS continue, and we're focusing on climate data and services. Noaa is pushing a climate ready nation as a new tagline, and we're participating in that. All the data types that we gather matter. Once you have a long enough record, it's going to be useful to determine climatologies and how things are changing. We want to continue to improve coastal resilience, including modeling and predictions, and we want to do that with an equitable service delivery lens. And I'm glad you guys are going to be hearing from Ashley Pfeiffer and that we've got her on board to work with all the regions in the IOOS office on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility issues. And then economic development, being in the Department of Commerce, is an ongoing priority, of course. And then I've got some slides to tell you a little bit more about how we're thinking about the new blue economy, which is an element within the blue economy, which is an element within the broader economy. Next slide. So with respect to the budget, Josie ran through it for you. This is some of the same data. To orient you to this chart, the medium blue and the dark blue bars are the president's budget requests, and the Kelly green and the light green are the enacted levels for each year. So you see that 2021, there was 6.9 million enacted in national dollars and 40.5 million in the regional line. So that's 2 line items in the ocean service budget for IOOS. And then, as Josie mentioned, we had a historic increase in the president's budget request. It was really 50 million over the previous year's president request, which was amazing. And then we saw a 500K increase in the regional line enacted, and 7.2 is the amount listed in the national line. It's not actually as much of an increase as it looks like. We had 200K of that is money that we've been kept in another office, that we hired a modeling portfolio manager, and we've moved that money into the IOOS budget permanently, which is a good thing, but it wasn't an increase in overall appropriations. That was sort of a zero-sum game. But we got adjustments to base because our federal salaries are in that line item. So not the increases we had hoped for, but still a good story overall over the last few years. And then there's a lot of other things going on in the mix this year. Next slide. So I've got a few. The green check mark is we got continuing resolutions on hurricane supplemental passed back in the fall. The infrastructure bill has a yellow check mark because we're still in a waiting game in terms of the numbers being finalized. I have the PAC funding and infrastructure. Bill Burnett was talking about a little bit. Some of the TAO and the DART funding he was talking about is from that PAC line item, the procurement, acquisition, and construction. And in the ORF category, the IOOS regions are in line to receive some of that funding. And Am I being recorded, Joe?
I believe so.
So I don't want to quote a number on the record because it might change. And so that's the problem is we think we know the number. We're pretty sure we know the number. And I don't want to be quoted on the number at this time because if it changed because of some small rescissions or changes and expectations are different in the end, I don't want to get caught in a fib, if you will. What we were able to do with the planning number is give each of the regions 3 scenarios of planning, with the middle scenario the most likely, and ask everyone to plan as much as possible to that. We're expecting final approval of the spend plans to be any day now, and as soon as that is available, the approval, we will release the request for applications, which is the notice to send in the proposals for the grants. We had hoped to use existing mechanisms. We're going to be forced to use new grants for these dollars instead of using existing funding mechanisms. We are expecting to do non-competitive awards to the regions for these dollars, so that's a good news story compared to being asked to do it in a different way. I was a little bit distracted when I first joined. Listening to Bill was compelling, but I was also on the phone with his boss. So she's in charge of about 1/3 of the line items reporting up to OMB for the infrastructure spending. And I'm an Ocean Service Senior Lead for provisions, including Provision 11, which is on this slide. So the reporting structure is getting more formalized internally. The fact that within the Ocean Service, am supporting Mary Erickson from the Weather Service is a good thing. So I'll be there at the table in the long run as we report the results of all these dollars. So IOOS is there. We'll get you those funds as soon as we can. We also did just get approval for the disaster supplemental funds, which have that green check mark. The IOOS line items are getting a total of $5.6 million in that. That's a pretty good number. 1.4 of that is damages and repairs, and GCOOS is in line for a bunch of that. And then the other 3.6 of that is for hurricane glider operations, data assembly, and data assimilation activities. And we're actually running that in a singular award through Sakura, then sub-award to the other regions as a more efficient mechanism to get it done than to do 5 different grants. So we're glad about those resources finally moving. Our annual approach are still not finalized in terms of our national dollars, and we're hoping that happens within the next week or so. So it's been a vexing year in terms of how long all the delays are. All of the actions are stacking up in a very little bit of time, and we're going to maximize and get as much out the door as we can. I think that's good for that slide. Next slide. Oh, the Build Back Better bill is gray on that last slide because if you watch the news, there's not a lot of discussion. There's a little hope that something might happen. My hope's been fading, so I'm making the gray text grayer each month. So eventually you won't be able to read it, but hopefully maybe that'll change back to dark blue. All right, next slide. So the blue economy, when we talk about the blue economy, the many different definitions over time, I put on here a few different key reports that have come out recently. In 2016, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a global organization of the 40 biggest GDP countries in the world, put out a report estimating that the ocean economy, and in that they included the ecosystem services and sustainability as a requirement within that calculus, is at 1.5 trillion a year in 2015 terms and expected to double by 2030. In 2010 terms, expected to double by 2030 to 3 trillion per year. So that's well documented in multiple different studies about the growth in the sector. The EU put a report out in 2021. Noaa put out a blue economy strategy in 2021 as well. Next slide. So within that blue economy, so anything that produces and delivers economic benefit from the use or on, in, and around the ocean. Dr. Spinrad, our new AA head of Noaa, has been talking about the new blue economy. He's a co-editor of this book that's pictured on this slide. And then we have a diagram from our ocean enterprise study there to describe it a little bit more. When we talk about blue economy, we mean the ocean information services that help people make decisions. And those decisions have an economic value that can be characterized and understood. And that value is part of the new blue economy that contributes to the blue economy or the broader economy. And to give you an example, wind development to me is part of the blue economy. Ocean data and information and predictions that enable wind development siting to happen, that's part of the new blue economy that enables the blue economy. So you've got these different nested layers of activities. And in the new blue economy, we talk about providers of the data, technologies to do that, and service those data providing technologies, producers of that data, including the entities and the tech, and then intermediaries that do something with that data to add value, create predictive capabilities and decision support tools that help end users make a decision. So next slide. So within Noaa, Dr. Spenrad talks about these priorities. We were lucky enough to be getting done with the repeat of the Ocean Enterprise study that we just released in December of 2021. The survey year was 2020, so the title of the study is 2015 to 2020, so we have a 5-year trend analysis now. And as a reminder, this study that we did in 2015, we repeated, it includes all of the companies and firms in the United States that are doing ocean observing, mapping, and data information delivery within the oceans and coasts and Great Lakes. And the results are on our next slide. The difference between 2015 and 2020, we now have 300 more companies at 814, 9 more states at 45 states, 325,000 jobs, so an 80,000 job increase, and about 8 billion in annual revenues, which is almost $1 billion more than 5 years ago. And this includes a period where almost a full year of this survey was during the COVID pandemic. And at the very bottom, you see the exports were 1.4 billion and are now estimated at 1.8 billion. So this is a key thriving component within that larger blue economy, and it's a good news story in terms of the tech development with the United States. And so we're going to keep working and describing how our ocean information services are part of the broader economy. Next slide. So within Noaa, we're working towards, so as an example of something within, I don't know how I got your logo on here, Josie, but you get credit too for this slide. The IOOS Association is still on there. A recent report came out, which is a sea level rise technical report. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. This is the type of authoritative information source that Noaa puts out, and the types of authoritative information that the regions also put out that provides decision support tools for different purposes. And so this is recent. It came out, from my perspective, this is a decision support tool that's in that new blue economy context. And in this case, we put out 30-year, sea level rise data and projections, and we put some conclusions that emissions matter and that the sea level rise that's predicted is pretty severe in many parts of the US over the next 20 and then 70 years. And so I put that in as an example of the types of authoritative products we want to deliver within the new blue economy. Next slide. So within Noaa, Dr. Spenrad has asked for us to do some work to build plans to grow that new blue economy faster. And we're going to go about doing that by building a capability to track and spur that activity within Noaa a little bit faster. Next slide. So we've developed a project charter. We've developed a draft work breakdown structure. We're going to develop a near-term action plan that fits with all the activities that are ongoing now, and then a longer-term roadmap to grow that new blue economy. The 3 boxes sort of in the middle of this slide that are underneath that gray bubble are the draft strategies that we've put into a Noaa strategic plan that's in draft right now. So what are the pieces of this that we're talking about? They're in those boxes. We want to promote the development of the ocean enterprise, that private sector market growth opportunity. Within the middle box, improve and augment our core ocean information services. That's what IOOS does. That's what NDBC does, delivering ocean data and information for decision support. And in that right box, stakeholder engagement to target those information services to who needs them, to make sure equitable service delivery is ongoing as well. So that gray blob in the middle is showing you that none of those 3 boxes are independent. They're relying upon each other. And so a lot of these things, if we did nothing, the new blue economy would grow. And what we're going to do is try to figure out how can we accelerate its growth and capitalize and characterize those growth those growth patterns and celebrate them as we go. And so we've got a small team within NOS that's going to roll out a plan and then start engaging with the rest of Noaa and build a roadmap for doing this faster growth. Next slide. I'm hitting the arrow key. And so within the roadmap planning, we've got a project charter. We're trying to capture the core information services that we know we have now. There's so many ocean-related programs, and we've talked within Noaa about creating an oceans and coast team within the larger Weather, Water, Climate Board within Noaa, so that we have a better voice for those ocean issues in the broader Earth systems modeling and predictions context. And in the end, we're about taking data and information and delivering solutions. So that's what that right side of that diagram is. Next slide. And so with regard to the IOOS contributions and participation in this whole concept in the new blue economy, when you hear Dr. Spinrad talk about it, he will say things like, IOOS is the currency of the realm in the new blue economy. And so what you're doing in GCOOS is what we're doing in the IOOS office and the other regions, delivering ocean information to stakeholders who need it, tailoring that information service so that the stakeholders can make efficient decisions and understand the decisions that they're making. So we did a whole drill within the in the spring meeting with all the regions in town. We did a Jamboard exercises, and we're still analyzing the input, and we're going to use that towards the next set of engagements we have with all of the regions together in the fall. And we're looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and including the IOOS regions in this roadmap that I talked about. Next slide. So upcoming events, and they're maybe relevant for you all to be aware of. We've got our, we're doing a refresh of our IOOS strategic plan, thinking about adjusting our implementation to planning approach so it's a little more transparent. It gets refreshed a little more frequently so that you all and our office and our interagency partners and other agency partners such as NEBC will be able to see what's going on in the near term and in the distance and be able to join the party, if you will, as we do implementation planning, sort of in a more nimble way. The IOOS Advisory Committee is meeting next week for its spring meeting. It's a virtual meeting with a few participants, such as our new member from Guam is coming in person to DC so we can be in the same time zone. That's May 11th. We're going to have climate, new blue economy, and diversity inclusion on that agenda. And then another item on my slide is the National Academies just released its Gulf Research Program funding awards, and Steve DeMarco, I think, is on the line, and I had a chance to get a briefing from his team with the National Academies on the Understanding the Gulf of Ocean Systems program. And so that's 5 years of funding going on in the Gulf of Mexico, and I highlight it for you all so that you become aware of it. And a challenge that they are supposed to take on is figuring out how to transition those capabilities to operations at the end of that 5-year period. And how do we do that, and where does that funding come from is an open question in my mind at the moment. And I'm happy to work on that with you in GCOOS along with those partners executing those projects. But it's going to be more sampling and more forecasting capabilities in the Gulf, and I thought you should be aware of that as well. Next slide. I'm trying to look at time. I think I'm supposed to be done. And this is my thank you slide. Thank you for everything you do, GCOOS. And a couple of points here. Thanks to the Southern Mississippi Radar Team for offering to host the 13th Radio Wave Operators Working Group in 2024. And thanks to all the Ocean Technology Transition and the Habon pilot project team members who are persevering through the last 2 years of COVID. And with that, I think that's the end of my slides, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, very, very informative. Any questions for Carl, please? I have an observation. I guess it's something I've always wondered. As much as the upper levels of Noaa have going on with new concepts, new approaches, new theories, new working groups, new task groups, how in the world do you, Carl, have time to do your real job? I mean, you're just pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I wonder that occasionally. the cool thing about this new blue economy work is it is what we do. It's our reason for being. And so it is kind of my day job. The tricky part is to move something forward within a large bureaucracy to make a difference faster. And I need to do that with humility and without bombast and chest thumping, right? So that we get entrained more of the participants that should be more closely aligned and not competitive and fighting for the resources because we don't have enough resources. So we need all the ocean, coastal, Great Lakes observing community players within NOAA to be working together. So for me, this is a coalition building opportunity that our office is supposed to be doing anyway. And we have the highest level attention from above right now. And so that's a good situation. Sure, it creates a little more hours in my day occasionally in terms of coordinating. And so that's a good question. The other answer is my deputy, Chris Arzeas, and division chiefs Dave Easter and Derek Snowden have been doing a great job of trying to build the team, and we have been. We still have challenges in that, you know, we're not that big, and we lose a person, and it's a big loss in terms of filling spots. But the team's been doing a great job so that I'm doing less of the internal day-to-day management than I ever did before. And that's one of the ways that I'm able to cover down on the higher level stuff.
All about teamwork.
Yep.
Other questions?
Go ahead.
Stephen?
Yeah, yeah, I think all up and down the IOOS ladder, we're in positions where you lose one person in any level, and it's kind of a mini crisis. But I was thinking that for the budget bar graphs, it would, especially the way things are going now, it'd be useful to have a version that's also inflation adjusted.
Yeah, we could do that. Might not be a happy picture, huh?
No.
Yeah.
But depending upon what type of message you're trying to get across, it could be important.
Yeah. I've been vexed by this whole infrastructure funding process by how little we've been able to share the information because of this spend plan approval thing that Congress has been asking for. So I'm really looking forward to being able to build some bar graphs that have those increases, and we could do what you're talking about too, Stephen, if we were, and then it starts to be a little bit better story.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Carl. I guess you can't say much about the IIJA funding, 100 million of ORF funding over the next 5 years. That's 20 million a year, I guess. And maybe I didn't catch it. Or how closely linked is that to? Is it going to feed into the RAs directly, or is it? I mean, you know, without saying what you can't say, obviously, but I'm just wondering what will direct impact on individual RAs be? Do you think?
Yeah, each RA knows from our office planning numbers that were 650, 850, and 450 per year. So give us a plan for those dollar amounts in 3 scenarios. And if you know my office well enough, you would be able to guess maybe which scenario might be most likely, and you plan for that so that that's sort of plus or minus 50K of risk that things change. I'm not changing in those numbers, but they might change above me.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. With respect to golf course has a lot of potential for making an end-to-end product that at the end of 4 or 5 years should become operational. It has a lot of innovative sampling, innovative modeling, and techniques that will hopefully enable us to take this whole loop current problem to the next level, as well as the whole eddy shedding process that it's not going to go away. Do you envision perhaps that, you know, at the end of 5 years that maybe this could be transitioned to IOOS, or because the stakeholders involved in this are broad with respect to industry, federal government, as well as academia. So it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, so I'm open to multiple options for success, and I could see GCOOS and IOOS being an operator for that capability, and I could see Noaa picking that up. And what I don't know is how to manage the uncertainties of our budget process that we have that's gone kind of kerflooey over the last 7 years in terms of lack of process, in terms of the formal budgeting. And so for something to be successful where we can pick it up 5 years from now, Nick, we need to be deciding that within the first 2 years of this 5-year period and working it for the next 3 years to make it so. And so that is something that I would like to try to do, while I also have to support the president's budget. So,
Understood.
yep.
So Nick, you know this is being recorded. You just said that you're going to solve the loop current problem in the next 5 years, right?
No, we're going to make significant inroads into solving that problem, especially with the new techniques.
Cool.
Okay, you put me on the spot.
I think the other big benefit to what's happening with golf course and what GCOOS has been doing recently is we really could get a better tie between IOOS and Mexican equivalent.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be a benefit coming down the pike. And Jorge is going to help work that, right?
Absolutely.
Joe, we have another
Okay.
question in the box. I know we're getting up on the break hour. It's up
Okay.
to you.
Now we've Catherine Weathers was asking to present a question. So Catherine, go right ahead.
I don't think she has the mic as a participant, so I'll go ahead and read
Okay,
it from
Chris,
the.
can you go ahead and read it?
Yes, her comment is, I like the comment of the currency for the blue economy. On that note, how are you working with Noaa and Noaa funded partners to have the data be interoperable throughout the economy?
Good question. That's an ongoing thing we do pretty regularly in terms of working across like sampling technologies and domains. So for biological data, for physical data, for chemical data, working with the community of practitioners, documenting best practices, putting out the standards and protocols. And so for instance, Bill Burnett listing the AirDAP servers for the regional data. That's a more modern technology than the former FTP method that wasn't so interoperable. So now we've got a machine-to-machine capability that's a proven technology. We're making that available, and we post manuals about the best techniques and practices. And we have our data management team within the IOOS office working with all the regions to ensure as much consistency across the board so that we can do that. But another set of questions in there in our diversity and accessibility work is, are we getting things to the lowest common denominator of all the communities who need the information? And so there's more to be done, and it doesn't end any given day. We keep working it.
There's a part 2 to that question that asks, are you currently working on an uncrewed system standard?
Well, no, not one, but many. So I say that not to be flip, but we have a good standard for buoyancy gliders, and we have a glider data assembly center, and we've been updating and upgrading our QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control methods, and ensuring that anybody that's flying a glider can use that as a resource and not have to build that data assembly capability on their own. And so we've done that on a really strong basis for underwater gliders. We haven't done it as sufficiently and significantly yet for surface vessels, for instance. We're working with NDBC and PMEL, the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory that's part of OAR, on that set of capabilities. And there's new technologies coming on board all the time, so it's an ongoing work challenge as well. So not one standard for all UXS, but yes, working on the standards for UXS as they come online.
Very good. Okay, any other questions? If not, I'll thank Carl again for taking the time to be with us again, and invite you to Carl to stay tuned for the remainder of the day. We are scheduled for a break now. We're a little behind schedule, so I'd like to go ahead and break until 3:10. And at that time, I would encourage you to take a good break, because when Scott Rader starts briefing us, you'll need all the attentive energy you can have to follow and grab it all, because Scott will fill your brain with a lot of good, great ideas. So without any further ado, if there's any other questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn for 15 minutes and reconvene at 3:10 Eastern, 2:10 Central. All right? Okay, folks, thank you. We'll see you in a few minutes.